Well, all aboard. We're ready to take another faith journey. As we have discussed in the past, as we go through our faith journeys, it's when we accept Christ. And we've been using the analogy of getting on God's train. He wants everybody on the train. It doesn't matter if you're little bitty or older or in your senior years. He doesn't mind. He wants you on that train. And your ticket is Christ. When He gave His life for us, He bought the ticket for us and helps us get on that train. We're all on different trains headed toward the same objective goal as being with God for eternity. We've been visiting with different people in the community and their faith journeys, when it began, and some of the things that have meant a lot to them through their years. And we're so fortunate today to have LJ Powell with us. He is the coach, baseball coach at USAO, and he has come to tell us about his faith journey. Thank you, LJ, for being with us today. And first of all, most of us are just curious. We'd like to know when your faith journey began.
Liz, this has always been a concern of mine because so many people say they have been hit by lightning or had a thunder or something other that made them know when Christ walked into their lives. But you know, I've always I was fortunate enough to be raised in a home that our bedroom was shared with Dad and Mother. And when I was a little tyke, I can vividly remember my father, before he went to crawled into bed, he always knelt beside his bed and said a prayer. And that's the way I was raised. And so I've never been hit by lightning or had that loud boom of thunder or something or other to wake me up and say, hey, you're now on the Christian walk. But it's always been part of my life. I have, like I say, fortunate enough to have a dad and mother that put this in front of me and lived that type of life. And I never heard my dad say a word of profanity, except one time when a cow kicked over a bucket of milk that he had a couple of choice words. And then he immediately turned to me and my brother, who were milking next to him, and apologized for it and said, you'll never hear that again. So that's the type of home that I was raised in, Liz, and fortunate enough to be associated with several ministers in the Methodist Church there at Mountain View. And Dad, we were always involved in church, some type of, whether it be at that time fellowship of the Methodist youth. And so I don't know, it's sometimes I get concerned about it when people are talking about it, but I think I was fortunate in that type of a life in front of me.
Oh, most definitely. I think today we need fathers that are bowing on their knees by the side of their bed. What an example that was for you, and what an example it would be for young sons and daughters in their homes. I think I have talked to quite a few people. Not everybody has the same experiences, you know, accepting Christ. Sometimes it's a slow, gradual thing that you've learned about Christ. You know Christ is a big part of your life. And then others, it's, you know, they have been away from the church and then go to a revival and it's a sudden awareness. I don't think God cares how you get your ticket. He just wants you to get that ticket and get on board with Him. And I think that's why it's so important to have, like, small children, teaching them those things from day one. And it's to give them that armor to face everything that they have to face out in this old world. Now, you said you grew up in Mountain View.
Yes, I've, with the exception of 1 year, I've never been more than 50 miles from home. Well, I did go to Oklahoma City University, which is 100 miles from Mountain View, and and that was a long way back in 1951. But it's I've been very fortunate to be in Chickasha since 1958, and in the public school system, and now at the college. But it's one of those things that I think is important to me. And I have young coaches to ask, how in the world do you stay in a place that long? I said, I want to see new things and adventure into new life. But I don't care anything about moving. I kind of like what I'm doing and where I am, and so God has blessed me with that opportunity.
Did you, when you started out, did you play baseball in high school and college, or
In high school, I played everything: football, basketball, baseball, and Coach even took our baseball team to the county track meet, and we won that thing. But but I've been blessed over the years by people. My high school coach had a tremendous influence on my life. I think that there's a lot of people that has had a great influence in my life, and he was one of them, of course, with my parents, and several ministers that I've become associated with. But as I look back, I think I've been kind of guided or directed into the field that I don't say I chose. I think that I was put there and placed there, and I feel like I have a calling to do what I'm doing, just like a minister has a calling to a church or something of this nature. When I was in high school, I did want to. My high school coach and my dad brought me over to about three of us to a football playoff between Chickasha and Frederick, and so I thought that was pretty neat. But then after I got into college and found out the type of education program Chickasha Public Schools had, and they were one of the tops in the state at that time, and I wanted to come to Chickasha, and but when I was in high school, we had study halls at that time, and I very seldom attended a study hall. My high school coach would come and get me, and we'd go work on the baseball field. And I think that he told me what to do, and I did the work, and he watched me. But it was a lesson that excuse me, that I have learned from him, how to maintain a field or a gymnasium or something of that nature, whatever we're doing, and it's paid dividends many times. And I still enjoy doing it today. But as I look back, I think that even back as far as the 6th or 7th grade, I was kind of guided in the direction of being a teacher or a coach or something of this nature. And I'll say this, Liz, I think there's about 3 words that really stand out in my life, of course, by God being one, but I think there's nothing greater or more complimentary than to be called dad or coach. And those things mean a lot to me, and I don't know, I just enjoy doing what I'm doing, and people ask me how long I'm going to stay. I don't know. I just tell them it's in God's hands. I don't know when, and what I'm going to do or when I'm going to do it. And that's kind of the way I've lived my life, and it's an opportunity that I think He afforded me to work, and I've been very fortunate to work with tremendous young men and young women, and not only in the school system but in the summertime, and baseball is, or softball is a medium of which I'm able to present my faith and to these young people. But I think that started a long time ago, and everything has kind of guided and directed me in that direction. And I didn't go to college right out of high school. My dad had a little health issue, and we were cotton farmers and milked about 30 cows, and until I was a senior in high school, we milked them by hand, mother and dad and brother. And mother would milk about 2 or 3 and then go to the house and fix breakfast in the morning for us. And we would run and change clothes and go catch the bus to school. And I was always one of those guys that liked school. If it was raining or the weather is bad, well, the bus had to travel about 4 or 5 miles out of the way to come and get my brother and I. And remember one morning that Dad said, I'm not going to let you go to school today, so that bus won't have to come down these dirt roads in that mud this afternoon. And I cried most of the day because I couldn't go to school. But I think that you look in my experience past years, kids try to find a way not to go to school, but I think that it's important to me for these young people to get an education, and I spend a lot of time, and I've been really criticized at times for spending some time with young people that do not have a chance or haven't had a chance or has a problem, whether it be at home, and I got a call about 6 or 7 years ago from a scout wanting me to take a young man that was in the penitentiary, and he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he said that you're my last hope, LJ, and but this guy needs to get a college program started so he can get out. He was sentenced to 15 years, and he was down at Granite at that time, and I thought about it, and the first place I went to his church and talked to our minister about it, and we prayed about it, and finally I called him back and told him I would do it. Well, then I went to the president of the college, and he said, have all the confidence in the world, and you do what you think's best for the school and that young man. And they turned me loose, and with the opportunity, and prior to being released from the penitentiary, we got him an education program in place, and then one day his dad called me and told me that they wanted me down at Ada for a hearing between the judge and the district attorney, and that was something that I really struggled with, and but on the way down I finally just, what am I going to say? And finally I said, God, it's in your hands. If this young man is supposed to come to USAO, you'll handle it. Well, there was about 4 people in front of me, his mother and his dad and a friend that was a scout also. They asked him their name and their association with the young man and said, that's all, you're released. When they called me up there, I was completely at ease, and the judge asked me a few questions, and then the district attorney got a hold of me, and he turned me every way but loose. He said, you want this guy for his baseball abilities? And I said, sir, I never saw the guy before in my life. I don't know what kind of baseball player he is, but if an education is going to help him better himself, then that's what I'm here for. And that went on for about 10 or 15 minutes, and they turned me every way but loose. And after it was over with, the judge happened to be, I officiated basketball for several years, and even on the college level. Well, the judge happened to be a son of the high school coach at Ada, and he was a little 7 or 8 year old guy, and after every timeout or during the quarter, he would come up and want to go shoot baskets or want the basketball. So I would let him have it and might go play a little catch or something with him. But anyway, I wanted to talk to him, and I waited for him, asked his secretary if it'd be all right. She said, sure. So he and the district attorney were talking in the office, and they came out, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable at that time, but at ease, and talked to the judge and told him, asked him if he remembered those things. He said, I sure do. And so the district attorney looked at me kind of with some skepticism and wanted to know if that had any effect on, looked at the judge, had any effect on your ruling, of course. But anyway, he looked at me and stuck his hand out and he said, "Sir, you're one of the few people that's ever changed my mind in the courtroom. The things you said and the way you acted and the way you presented yourself told me that you really cared about this guy and didn't even know him." And I'd never met him, but it turned out great, and he came in and finished his college degree. He now has his master's and married a beautiful young lady, and they have 3 daughters, and he's very successful. He has got out of the coaching and is now helping his father, who has a health problem and a big cattle buyer and cattle rancher down in the eastern part of the state. And he is also training cutting horses. So that's the success story. And of course, you never know who you're going to touch and whose life you're going to change a little bit. And we got a Christmas card this year from a young lady that same age as my son's, and she had some some problems at home and during her high school years, and I traveled with our high school basketball team and kept the scorebook for coach. But she came to our house one night in her pajamas, and her dad was an alcoholic, and she was quite concerned, and she was really, really hurting that night, and she spent the night with us, and but in several other nights. But I see her a lot in town, but the Christmas card kind of summed it up. I think that she put a little note on there. She has 2 boys and a girl now, and she said, I thought you might like to see the results of the seeds you planted several years ago. So that's, to me, that's what my life's all about.
Well, I know I had the fortune to work with you at intermediate school several years ago, and I saw how you worked with 6th and 7th graders. And sometimes they're not the easiest people in the world to work with. But you would pick the ones that we all just knew was not going to make it. Why even bother? But you did. You bothered. And I think you touched a lot of young people's lives. And you may not even have been aware of some of the lives that you affected. But I think Christ was using you. And I'm glad you listened to him. Listen to his direction.
Well, Liz, again, I'll go back to my mother. When I didn't go to college, when I got out of high school, and we were in our modern home. We had a bathroom and was in one of the bedrooms, and my mother was sitting on the floor one evening and sorting clothes and getting ready for laundry the next day, and she was crying, and I was shaving. I was getting ready to go to town to see a little girl, and so I asked her what was wrong, and she said, I would like for you to let me get you ready to go to school with Cecil, which is my brother. And I said, Mom, we can't afford it. And she said, yes, we can. We'll make it some way. And but anyway, that was the conversation for a little bit. And a week or two later, on a Sunday evening, our pastor said that he would like to see me and my family after the services. So we visited with him, and he was telling us about a scholarship that was available at Oklahoma City University for anyone who wanted to go into youth ministry. Well, I had always leaned that way. If I went to college, that's what I thought, not necessarily youth ministry, but something working with young people. And to go back to my high school coach, he would. I got a knee hurt my junior year in high school, and I wasn't able to finish the year. But he took me and had me to help him with our 9th grade program, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade kids, and that was really my first coaching experience when I was a junior, in the latter part of my junior year, and sometimes when I wasn't able to play in my senior year. But again, it's the direction that God has pointed me through other people, and so I went to Oklahoma City. He took me to Oklahoma City University, and we went through, visited the campus, and so I decided to try it. And we had a young man, Joe Schellenberger was a senior at that time, and he had a couple of small churches down near Mountain View that he was serving on the weekend. And that afforded me the opportunity, a way to get to school and maybe come home once in a while on the weekend, because I certainly didn't have a car. But also he was working with at the Mistletoe Express office loading trucks, and he got me a job down there, and making more money than I ever made in my life, and also going to school. But the latter part of my first semester there, I had pneumonia, and I was struggling with the fact of being that far from home and going to school, and also getting contacted by the college baseball coach out at Southwestern at Weatherford to come and play some baseball, which they didn't have baseball at OCU at that time. So I went to my advisor, Dr. Peters, and asked him, talked to him about it, and he said, well, have you ever prayed about it, LJ? And I said, no, sir. He said, maybe we need to do that. So we prayed about it, and he said, I think you'll get an answer. I think you can handle this thing. Well, then I had pneumonia, and had to go home for a week and take some of the big old penicillin shots. But anyway, I got back to school and walked into class, and he asked me how things were going, and he said, after class, he said, you think that might be your answer, LJ? So anyway, I transferred to Southwestern and played a little bit of baseball, but not a whole lot. And again, those are some of the directions that I was pointed by other people. And then I have really never applied for a job that I've ever had. Laverne's high school basketball coach at Mountain View had moved to Anadarko and was a baseball and football coach at junior high over there, and he called about the middle of my senior year and wanted to know if I'd like to have his job. And sure. So he said, well, we got an interview set up with the superintendent tomorrow afternoon about 4 o'clock. Can you be here? So we drove down and visited with the superintendent about 15 minutes, and he's pushed the contract out in front of us and said, sign that. Said, you're the guy I'm looking for. $2,700 a year, Liz. But
and you thought that was lots of money.
We was rolling in the dough. But after we completed our my graduation at Southwestern, I went on a harvest with a harvest crew, and Mother and Dad used an optometrist in Anadarko, and they called us one day and told us that we had a house and Laverne had a job, that the doctors there at the hospital in Anadarko needed a secretary. So Laverne had a job, and there was a superintendent of schools in Shiprock, New Mexico, that owned a house in Anadarko, and had told one of the doctors about it. And so we had a house, and Laverne had a job, and we stayed there for 3 years, and we got a job offer. And this is one of the 2 jobs I've ever taken without talking to God about it. And he doubled our salary to go to Gallup, New Mexico as an assistant football coach and baseball coach. And we just waited around toward the end of the summer to go, and we got to Gallup, New Mexico, and the superintendent told us we were going to have a house out there. He would have one for us, and we got there, and they'd had a big oil boom, and he'd rented all of his houses, and we looked around at some places and that I wouldn't put my dog in. But about noon, the superintendent called me and said, I found you a house. It's a brick veneer home at over, told us where it was, and the football coach came by and took us over there. Well, the brick veneer was tar paper brick over shiplap, and in the modern part of the house was a bathroom and a stool in the corner of the bedroom, and we had to shoo the chickens out to go in there, and Laverne began to cry, and I said, we're going home. So I told that football coach that we was headed back to Oklahoma, and we went to the motel. In a few minutes, the superintendent came by and was upset about it because school was going to start in about a week, and he said, "You'll never teach a day in New Mexico." And I said, "That doesn't bother me." And so we loaded up we didn't load it up. We had everything we owned in a little 4x4 U-Haul trailer, and it certainly wasn't full. So we headed back to Oklahoma and stopped by Lawton. And I stopped at a sporting goods store down there and asked that guy, I said, do you know of any jobs available? And he said, yeah, there's one at Walters, and there's a junior high job at Frederick. And he said, I would advise you to go to Frederick. So he said, just a minute. So he picked up the phone, he called the superintendent, said, well, yeah, I'll wait for him. So we drove to Frederick, and he met us at the door and walked into the office and said, sign this contract. So we did that, and he said, well, we'll find you a house, and let's go back and get your trailer and bring it over here. And he had a couple of custodians there to help us unload, and we got rid of the expense of the U-Haul and went to a motel and spent a couple of days. And one day he came out on the practice field and said, you've got a home just across the street. So anyway, and then I came through Chickasha, and they just hired a new superintendent, Frank Foley, and he had a couple of sons that played basketball and football, and I'd met him through the officiating and basketball, and I said, if you have a job available sometime, I'd like to talk to you. Well, I sure will, Coach. I remember that. Of course, he knew who I was. I went on to Frederick, and about a week he called me and he said, I got a junior high football job and a baseball job. Would you like to come over and visit with us? And I jumped in the car and we came to Chickasha, and that was in the summer of 1958, and we've been here ever since. Okay. So it's then when I retired from the high school baseball, I worked with San Diego Padres as an associate scout, and one day I got a call from the administration at the college and said, we need you out to college to coach baseball. And I turned it down. And I had a young man that had played for me in high school that was playing out to college, and he came by the house on a Monday night and said, Coach, your paperwork is due tomorrow and you haven't filled it out. I want to know why you're not going to do it. And I hummed around a little bit, and he said, so this nonsense you was telling us when I was in school that you got to have a reason for what you do, and an excuse is not acceptable. I said, I want to know what your reason is. And I said, Sean, I don't have one. He said, see you, and walked out the door. We filled out the paperwork. I turned it in, went to the state tournament of scouting for San Diego on Wednesday at the state tournament, and got a call that I was a new baseball coach at USAO, and that's been 13 years ago.
Been 13 years, 13 good years.
13 great years.
Yes, and you've had a wonderful opportunity to show Christ. We don't spend all our time sometimes talking about it, but I know those young men have really benefited from your walk with the Lord, and it reflects just being around you. You can just reflect Christ in your life, and that He has been in control. And we can find out, just like your incidents in New Mexico, by looking at the times that we are closest to God, and He will reveal to us the right choices. And I guess that when you were in New Mexico, that was not what He wanted you to do.
No,
but obviously He did want you coaching young men and showing them Christ that way. And I am so glad that you came today to share your faith journey and how you have been on this train for a while with him. And I wish you many more happy years in your baseball career and with the young men.